Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Infrared Show. This one will be a post-Soviet episode, so we like to keep it international here. So I'm glad to have Katya here. What's up?
Hi, yeah, I'm good. How are you guys? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's all good here. So it's how I found you. I just saw the tweet thread you did on the Belarus protests, and I just found it so interesting because when I compared the situation to the one we had here in Romania, it instantly clicked for me. So I just got more into reading what you had to say, and it made so much sense because it's rare that you get the occasion to have someone who is not simping for the liberals or for the conservatives here. So thank you for being there. So I have a lot of questions about it, but I'd like to start by talking about what leftists do in post-Soviet countries. So could you tell us more about that? Like how the left is doing in Russia?
Yeah, unfortunately, not so great. Although I guess everything that's happening depends on to what you compare it, because I was just writing about the comparisons between the Russian and American elections. And for instance, if you look at it that way, then of course, there's way more representation for like socialism and left views. Although then you have another issue where a lot of like the communists we have, for instance, in the Russian parliament, the Duma, or just in general, the people who you're able to vote for, those are like more reactionary, or the people who tend to align with the power a lot of the times. And also those who, a lot of the people who are like leaning against the regime tend to not take seriously when they don't have the same grounding in theory. Basically they don't get the same appeal as say Bernie within the US, even though they might be more actual leftists. So it's a very mixed bag. But at the same time, there are some very inspiring smaller fractions within existing parties, or just like grassroots groups that are popping up. But there's a lot of difficulty for them to actually get on the agenda, because especially like if you're not functioning within CPRF, for instance, the Communist Party of Russia, or the Just Russia Party, which is more socialist, but still it has some very progressive unionists in it. Like if you're not functioning within their auspices, then it's just impossible for you to get anywhere. And of course, there's also on the grassroots levels, for instance, if you're, say, a communist activist somewhere in like Izhevsk or away from Moscow, where in Moscow the power is mostly garnered by the liberals, but like if you're even doing something, you can get in some hot water with like the local authorities, or like some kind of mafia that's running things. So it's like a precarious existence. Nonetheless, I am very happy to see that like what we have now in terms of like the offerings of Marxist-Leninist thought, and just in general like people who are not just like against capitalism on paper, but then are pretty much like neoliberal and everything.
Yeah,
so
just liberals.
Yeah, exactly. It's much better now than it used to be previously. So, and especially among people who are younger. So I think that there are some positive movements. However, I still think that one of the main problems is the fact that in the post-Soviet reforms, there was a lot of attention driven to making blacklisting everything that's connected to communism, and basically just making it very unpopular culturally. So this reluctance to accept communism as something that's like not basically like the equation goes between communism and nationalism, which is exactly the whole point of anti-communist propaganda during the Cold War and afterwards, and still. So that I feel like is one of the biggest problems. So basically just like breaking this barrier where younger people might have communist leanings, but at the same time they have been told so much about how this Sovok, which is how in Russian you refer to pejoratively sort of to the Soviet era, how evil it was, how Stalin killed all the people, and like everything is just terrible and cannot be salvaged.
So yeah. Leftists have not succeeded in making communism cool again?
Not yet, but I hope that they might, because I see more and more people leaning towards like this notion, and hopefully they will in the future too.
I mean, we see ourselves as one of those groupuscules who want to just open up and bridge with other leftists, especially from those in the post-Soviet countries.
Yeah, and I think it's very important, and that was also what made me really interested in the story with Belarus, because I don't personally have any affiliation except for like some of the friends that I have from there. But basically what I was seeing is that everyone was just so gung-ho to jump to supporting the movement, the opposition movement, like especially like basically everyone apart from the tankies. So that was just very disheartening, because especially like that no one was taking into consideration the precarity of the Belarusian workers in face of the neoliberal reforms that the opposition is talking about. But at the same time, and nobody was really trying to inquire like about the local parties. So basically, it's kind of just like the same as when they talk about Russia in the West. Like all you hear is Navalny, which does not even reflect the actual situation of the opposition in Russia. But the same thing here is like, if you keep hearing about like Tikhanovskaya and everything, but the actual people on the ground, they're not just like ready to go support the opposition. It's more nuanced than that. And that's why, but the bad thing is that basically there are some Marxist movements in Belarus, and there are worker movements, but most of them don't have the capacity to express themselves in English or other languages that would be internationally available to other people. So this kind of makes it harder for unity to happen, because like you just don't get as many voices. So there are of course like I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and there are also for instance, I think there's this communist Greg Butterfield who is like trying to actually like bridge the like the situation here in the US where he's from, and with like very underrepresented factions, for instance, like the communists in Donetsk or Luhansk, which is like someone you don't hear at all from like anywhere. So
we're actually going to have a call with one communist from Donbass this weekend.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to watching that. That's great. Well, what's his name or her name, their name?
I'm not certain that they want to be.
I don't know
yet.
Yeah.
But you actually contributed personally in bridging those leftists in Belarus. You translated one of their articles on the situation for Home Intern, I think.
But I didn't translate a Belarusian article. It was actually one of my comrades back in Moscow who is non-Belarusian, but he was actually the one who introduced me to some of the Belarusian Marxists, and we wanted to, Home Intern, which I am not part of, but they reached out to me because they wanted some text that would kind of present the situation. But in Belarus, like there were problems with the internet, as we know, and so basically it was like this was the next best thing available at that point. So
right.
Hopefully,
they just shut it down, right?
Yeah, they shut it down at times. I think it stopped recently, but now that like after the inauguration, like the protests increased, so it might be a thing again. So we'll see. But yeah, it was like really hard getting in touch with people there at one point.
Yeah, that's really sad to hear. But you know, when liberals see such things, they just instantly side with the opposition, the liberal opposition, and they don't just refuse to go any deeper and analyze the things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually have had a lot of spats with like Russian people online about this, because they really, like, even those who are like, I don't know, let's say anarchists or social democrats, like they tend to obviously side with the protesters without trying to kind of put much nuance. But like when you talk about the danger of neoliberalism and like the Western influence and those Protestant, basically the repetition of Maidan, even though like the situations in Ukraine and Belarus are not similar, and like the Belarusian nationalism, while it exists, it's not as such a juggernaut as Ukrainian nationalism is. It's still hard, and they there tends to be a lot of rejection from the Russian left in general, except for like the real Marxist-Leninist factions, to denounce this. And like there's basically, which is basically what the article that I translated addressed, that you cannot just try to get rid of the Lukashenko in power and like his oligarchy and everything that comes with it, and try it out anew with the neoliberals, because it's just not going to work. That's what we've seen time and time again everywhere, in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America, the whole world. So that's a kind of a point of contention that just like doesn't seem to be like we can't really pass it. And but basically, like that's something that is what remains to this point right now is that, again, like Donetsk and Luhansk and Crimea still remain topics that no one, apart from people from the very left, are willing to discuss, because to them it's obvious that you have to side with Ukraine, because it has basically the opposition to Putin has conflated so much with support for Ukraine that you can't really tear them apart. So basically, there's just this knee-jerk reaction whenever you try to say that perhaps the people in Crimea did vote on their own volition, that immediately you are being branded like a Putin spot, which is like, yeah. So
it's pretty much the same in Romania, but it's not at the same level geopolitically with Crimea and so on. But the same thing applies here. We have when you have a corrupt establishment which is social democrat in name, and a liberal opposition which is brandishing itself like as the new savior of the country, like the new modernizer and the people who want to get closer to the EU, which is seen as a good thing here somehow. It's hard for progressives to actually go beyond this dichotomy and put a new position, put a position which actually speaks for the majority of the workers. Because as it comes, we're already part of the EU, and it's not going to be like we're going to be a first level country of the EU. We're always going to be a peripheral country, which will be a labor pool for the richer countries like Germany, France, or Spain.
Absolutely, and that's the fear everywhere.
Yeah, because it's also the demographic crisis. So a vast majority of the working class will migrate to the richer countries of the Europe, and nobody will actually work here, and the people here will then complain that nothing is is working because they're ignored. Also, if we're speaking at the age level, let me say millennials and boomers, it's really not the same compared to the US situation, where boomers are de facto associated with rich people, or maybe even capitalists, and millennials are the ones who just don't have anything to their name. Here the situation is a bit trickier because the pensioners here are actually the least rich category of the people.
Same as Belarus or Russia, or
exactly. I'm speaking for Romania, but I think you can just extend it to the whole of Eastern Europe, or most of it. Yeah, and when you see maybe the Social Democratic Party making some concessions like raising their pension levels, the liberals are instantly triggered by it and just want to deny that. And it puts the leftists in a really awful position where they need to side with the establishment, which is of course corrupt and nobody actually likes them. It even becomes reactionary on some positions because there's no alternative which is being built.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that basically this fetishization of the European Union it was the thing that drove the Maidan protests, and it's basically the thing that drives the Belarusian protests, because we never it's just and I am also even though I don't know the politics of Greece as intimately or even well, I am part Greek and also have a Greek citizenship, and basically, but at least like there in Greece, people have a way more reluctant position on European Union, and throughout recent history, like it has been quite a few times when you thought that they would leave because just made no sense at all. But I mean, yeah, we know what happened. But at the same time, like there's no criticism of that at all in the post-Soviet space, because basically, like there was this thing in the post-Soviet Russia, you would have this thing called Euro renovation, which is when you had like a really nice renovation done to your apartment. And I think that the same kind of mentality has attached itself to like thinking that something European is the norm and everything else is like whether it's Asiatic, Scythic or whatever, it's just not the norm, and
just barbaric.
Exactly,
just the Eastern hordes.
Absolutely, and that's and that in turn is what makes gives such a bad name to communism and like the third worldism, or like the basically the non-aligned countries as well. So all of it, like everything that did not result in joining the EU is considered to be bad and unproductive. However, obviously that there's it's not that the European Union is some benevolent organization that just wants to come to Belarus and liberate everyone and like, I don't know, give them gay rights, because they don't need that. That's just a way to peddle their agenda, and in the end you're just going to end up like Ukraine, where like you did have a pride parade in Kiev at one point, and then you have like Nazis beating people to a pulp in the streets. So I don't think that's something that anyone wants. So and that's all very upsetting.
Exactly. It's just hard to see those liberals struggling for something which is, when analyzed in depth, so immiserating for the people. Because they like to wrap it up as something good, when in reality it's actually incredibly awful for the vast majorities.
Absolutely.
But yeah, this is not a problem with the liberals in Europe as well. I think American ones do pretty much the same thing. So you're currently living in New York, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah, it's actually really interesting to observe what's happening here for that prism as well, because it almost, in a sense, I think that like actually there is probably a faction of people in the US that would also want to join the EU, like because they like tend to fetishize like some kind of Scandinavian social democracies and stuff like that. So and we're like basically like fetishize like Angela Merkel and Macron, and without like any kind of regard for the neo-colonialism that it is, and just basically because that's not Trump or Biden, then it must be good. But it's really upsetting because I feel like that even though like the pro-communist sentiment here is also on the rise, and basically that's also has been before he was in the coma, like one of the last things that Navalny posted was about like blasting American tankies for like revising the whole the Belarus thing. I think it was in regards to, but still, like I think that it's just like the fact that like people here are trying to like make sense of Soviet history and like accept it for what it is, way more than people who had lived in it and who have material history within it, like all of us do, and who actually like still to this day like can receive free healthcare, which is by no means perfect because it's very corrupt, and like there are scant resources that actually end up going to clinics and hospitals and regions, and like the welfare system is broken, but at the same time you still have like free healthcare.
Yeah, at least I can go. I can go with a broken foot and not get into debt like all these Americans here with us.
Exactly, yeah. You won't get like a couple $1,000 bill for that, and most likely you will be fine. Like even maybe it won't be a fancy facility, but still. And the same thing with like the fact that in Russia, in general, like people do have private property at this point, like because it will after the privatization, everyone was given the apartments, for instance, that the party was giving to them, or like their workplaces, and there were queues in which you could be to like actually receive them. So like it's kind of like even by like the capitalist viewing of it, a lot of people in Russia are actually better off in some things. Of course, like it doesn't mean that they're better off in general, but like at least they have access to things that here are not available to them because here everyone is a renter. So it's but it's really bizarre how people here like come to start appreciating them, but people back home don't. And the liberals, of course, try to trivialize everything and make it all about like the so-called freedoms. And I have noticed this a lot. Like when I was living in Russia on and off because I studied abroad and I worked abroad for some time before coming here to New York, and but still, like basically in 2014, I left and I hadn't been back for a lot of time for a while because I had school and then work here. And when I have seen over this period of time, like basically observing from outside the way that things developed, and it seems that like the American culture has taken over so much alongside the American liberalism that you have so much talk about like things like feminism and queer issues, and that's all great things, but at the same time, like you cannot have them without having class issues at the core, and none of that is ever discussed. And I feel like basically it kind of also makes the situation more difficult because concerns with like queer issues or feminist issues also cause a reaction in the government, and they're tightening the laws against women or against queer people so much that basically you it has become way more reactionary and way more restrictive than it used to be at the beginning of Putin's rule, or like in the Soviet Union itself, outside of the times when there were actually criminal persecutions for queer people. But basically, like, for instance, being a woman was absolutely fine during the Soviet era. However, and like you still have, for instance, like free abortions, which in the US are something completely unseen, and like there's so much fighting about this. But after like having read like a lot of American feminist theory, like the Russian feminists are now trying to build something that is like a feminist that's void of like the roots that they already have in place, and it's just like so bizarre.
Like, why don't they go back to Kolontai?
Exactly, yeah. That's just like doesn't really make sense, because the one, you cannot really establish something in a country just like by following blindly the patterns of the West. We've seen this fail everywhere. Like that just doesn't work, and it just like leads to reaction. And at the same time, like, why cannot you use workable examples? Of course, the USSR was not perfect for women, like to the point that I would want it to be. Like, for instance, we've never had like a woman in power as well. But even though like that's just doesn't make sense. I mean, we had like queens and everything. Like those ID polls don't really work as much. But like you had equality amongst women and men in a lot of terms. You had free childcare, you had free female healthcare, you had opportunities. You like it, even like in the 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, we had, for instance, a political party that was all women. That's something that like I feel like a lot of American liberals would just die for. But like somehow instead of like trying to do something like that here, they're just like and kind of like try to follow the existing patterns of liberals, like not just like liberalizing the women, but kind of like just giving them space, as everyone should. They're just like going nuts over things that just don't really matter as much, and that like really upsets me, and especially in the crossover with like the other countries, and because in the end, that what you get is something like in Poland right now, that it's a complete mess, and no one is happy, but at least everyone is anti-communist, so that's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Because the liberals, if you scratch them, they're the most rabid anti-communists, and they're the first people who actually imposed the laws to, I don't know, ban communist symbols, for example. It was from the Progressive Liberal Party here, which is a new party composed of old activist circles, people who are new to politics and so on. It was one from their party which actually proposed the law to ban communist symbols here, which didn't pass, but it's only because it didn't get enough traction. Because I'm pretty sure all their supporters would have been on track with that. And we've seen what happened with Ukraine. It started with communist symbols. It started with Lenin statues going down.
Yeah, I actually just realized that I am happy to be in New York because it like actually has one Lenin statue here. So that's kind of awesome, even though it's like not positioned as a proper statue, but it's like perched upon a residential building. But still, like it's kind of gives me hope. Although I do feel like the majority of the city here is overwhelmingly liberal, and not even though like you have some people here who are supporting like communist ideas, but still it's like not the biggest center of such thought, I feel, unfortunately.
Yeah. What makes these liberals so so cringy in any way. It's just that they're so elitist. So they pretend that they speak for the people, and in actuality, they're mostly trying to better themselves, to become the new managers of them. And it's also reflected in their actual jobs and education, because when I've seen the pro-European protests here, they were protesting corruption. They were all educated middle-class people who wanted more freedom to maybe expand their personal businesses, or just more liberalization in the private sector.
It's absolutely the same in Russia and in the post-Soviet space, as I understand. I'm not exactly sure about how much the libertarianism has grown in Belarus or Ukraine, but I would assume that pretty much the people in the opposition council, at least part of them, especially all those tech entrepreneurs, they're probably of a very libertarian leanings. But basically in Russia, the libertarians are growing incrementally. I remember that when I left in 2014, I remember that anyone barely knew who libertarians were, and then it exploded. You would say something like Ayn Rand, and nobody knew who that was, and now they're all reading her, and it's just I don't know if she would be happy or not that people in her homeland that she didn't really care about are now returning to her scribbings. But that's what's happening, and it's basically the obsession with the free market is overwhelming, and of course it stems from people who are already privileged and who are seeing in the current situation an opportunity to do basically what all the oligarchs did in the aftermath of the USSR's collapse, basically just looting everything for their own purpose, even though there's much less to loot right now. But even it's interesting how even though a lot of that happened back then, there are still new ways in which the government right now is taking into its own hands things like, for instance, the fishing industry, which is a very big part of Russian economy historically. And right now it's overwhelming because one of Putin's closest friends basically owns the whole of the fishing the fishing industries in Russia, and they're overwhelming the independent fishers everywhere. And instead of just asking for those industries to be taking back to the national proprietorship, real national, not just friends of the president, but the libertarians and liberals, of all sorts, are just basically after being the people in charge of them. I feel because they're not interested in privatization, nationalizations or anything. They just want their interests to be at the same level as Putin's interests and his buddies are now. So it's kind of basically, and that is the biggest problem with the Belarusian protests as well. If you want to support the opposition as a working man, you just have to understand that none of what's going to happen is going to be to your benefit. You're just exchanging the masters from one and also Lukashenko, even though he's also corrupt and has a lot of a lot of his friends are benefiting from the industries, and there's not a direct correlation with the way the country is developing and the way the people are developing. It's much better than in Russia, and it's the agriculture is basically more in the hands of the people in the industries are working much better, and they're still in the government, so it's like way more centralized and doesn't have as many opportunities to be abused as, for instance, in Russia or as in Ukraine. And that also like makes it like a much better welfare situation, which I don't think would be possible under a neoliberal rule, because I think I had written about it in like the thread that you saw perhaps, but for instance, I know from the people who are my friends from Belarus, like either living back there or who are living in Russia, because there's a free passage between Russia and Belarus, so a lot of people come to work because there are more opportunities that are like paying more.
They're going from Russia to Belarus?
No, from Belarus to Russia.
Okay.
I think some also do from Russia to Belarus, but a very small amount, especially like those who want to take advantage of the tech sector. So it's probably like mostly just people who are like well off. But yeah, and but basically like the medical services that they get, like the payouts that they get, that's like, of course they're way smaller than anywhere in Europe, but like as compared to like the GDP levels and like basically the prices and everything, they are much more acceptable than anywhere else. So it's like there is a certain level of life that people are actually clinging to preserve because they like even like if the pensions are dismal, but like without having any kind of legitimate like communist party, or basically like someone calling for a complete rehaul of this and complete nationalization, like basically they will lose the little that they have already. So it's that's, I think, that the most important thing that we don't really get to talk about a lot in like because most of the mass media is always covering the events from the points of view of like the city people, like not people in smaller villages and like.
Yes, exactly. That's the thing in Romania, and I think in Russia as well, that the migrants and the rural people are mostly ignored.
Absolutely, and that creates a very different point of view, because, for instance, if you're someone living in Minsk or Moscow or Bucharest, I'm sure that you're for instance, like you have a nice job, like somewhere like in the media or something, like I don't know, in a bank, then probably your material concerns are kind of met, so you are not struggling as much, and you can already think about things like, well, I want there to be like a pride parade or something like that, or basically like they're not allowing me to, I don't know, run for office as I would want to, like being like a part of, like, I don't know, a libertarian organization or something. But if you're like a minor in like some place in Belarus or Russia or Romania, like that doesn't get enough time on TV, like your main concerns are so that you would get your wages on time, that everyone like in your family has something to eat, that you have somewhere to live, and like medical opportunity, and just basically like it's much easier to live. I feel like that's something that people in the West will never get about like the situation, is that it's much easier to like just stay within the social contract that Putin kind of has with the Russians and Lukashenko has with the Belarusians, because basically what's happening with them in power is and I think it's a little bit different with Lukashenko because he was in power consecutively, so it's but Belarus was also in a much better place after the Soviet Union. But with Putin especially, it's evident that the conditions after the fall of the Soviet Union were so drastic that you literally had like, if you compare them to what's now, like living under Putin is not that bad. So basically, but what are the other options? Like, of course, there's the option of, say, Zyuganov and CPRF, which is like, I do not align with them in many ways, even though there's they're supposedly the Communist Party, but there's like a lot of weirdness going on in there, and as I've said, they're reactionary, but at the same time, at least like they have kind of like the idea is similar to mine at the center. And then there are also, for again, Just Russia has like some good ideas about labor and stuff, but basically, and people are voting for them. That's also like a myth that a lot of the liberal coverage of Russia is kind of like letting slip through the cracks. Basically, people vote overwhelmingly for Putin without voting for any other candidate.
How could that be?
Basically.
Sorry to interrupt, but I have to ask this now. You mentioned Navalny like 30 minutes ago. Like, can you tell us something about him more? Like in Western media, it's the only thing you hear. It's always Navalny, and he's the opposition leader. But from what I've heard is that he's kind of unpopular in Russia.
Exactly. That's kind of what I'm getting at as well. Is because people like when I still lived in Russia full time, I participated in as an election observer at elections, including one that was for the role of mayor of Moscow, and that's where I think that's basically the only thing that Navalny was where he participated as a candidate. Because I don't think that they didn't let him, and I'm not saying that like some of the reasons were valid, some weren't, but basically he could never run for president. But I saw with my very own eyes that in absolutely fair elections in where like I was pretty much serving as the person who was like observing that the votes were counted properly and everything was done properly, that people overwhelmingly voted for Sobyanin, like a third or a fourth voted for Navalny. That's true, but basically he and that's Moscow, where he's like that's where he lives, that's where most of his stuff is, and that's where the most of the liberal people who support him are. But other than that, like there's not that much that he can offer to the rest of the country, because basically he's like his views are very wishy-washy, because he basically does not seem to have any kind of ideology. He just like latches onto something that seems opportune at the moment, and then just like runs with it. So his rise to notoriety was through nationalism, and like with I think everyone has seen the video where he compares the people from the Caucasus region to cockroaches, and that's and basically like I recently did this thing where I looked through his Twitter account and searched for like some triggering phrases and things, and it seems like at one point in 2014 I stopped doing this. Like before that, he like there's a lot of like his activism against building a mosque in like the one of the Moscow's districts, and like there's like a lot of making fun of people who like wear hijabs and stuff like that. Then he just like stopped. So I think that there was some kind of I'm not following this like the structure of his campaign, or like just basically like what he's doing that closely, but I think there was like some rehaul of what his advisors were saying, and they said that it's not lucrative for him to continue doing that. So since he has pivoted to like some even like quite left issues, for instance, he said that like he wants to support unions, I believe, and he was like during the coronavirus lockdowns, he was saying that he wants the government to like give everyone payments, but I feel like it's kind of like he's like a lot of liberals in Moscow again, he's views are basically shaped by like watching an episode of John Oliver or something. Like he kind of like grasps that it's kind of cool, and so that's what the progressive politicians are doing in the U.S. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna do it here. And so he's similarly, he has also, I think he's changed his views on he's become like more accepting of like queer people as well, even though I remember like when he was against them, and it's just basically like he's an opportunist, and while what he does as a journalist is interesting, and like his investigations into like this corrupt schemes are like they're, some of them are really good, they're interesting, and they're completely rooted in reality. That's not a political agenda. Like basically you have to offer something, and I don't think he has ever made any like he has a political program with like an economic plan and everything, but it's like nobody reads that, and nobody really like tries to find whether it's applicable for them or not, because his main appeal to the people is basically that Putin bad, let's get rid of him, let's get rid of corruption. And that has been the same throughout. Since I first saw Navalny during the protests in 2000, in early 2010s, and after like when there was a big resurgence of the protest movement, and everyone was saying that this might become like the Russian Spring or whatever. But and throughout and until now, his main thing is that, and he's like. So of course he's not popular because like people would prefer, like if somebody was giving them a more precise programs, and like the Communist Party does, the Just Russia Party does, and like even the nationalists, for instance, like there's this man called Sergei Glaziev, who is like he's a very sketchy dude, but his economic program is which he presents like every once in a while, and it's like people are saying that they're gonna implement that, and then nothing happens, but it's like very progressive in terms of like what I would want to see, even though like I don't fully trust that, and in general like the borders between nationalism and socialism in Russia are so diluted as pretty much elsewhere, but like I guess again with the anti-communist sentiments, they're just convoluted. So yeah, but in general, like the approval that Navalny gets across the country is like 2%. So he is in no way viewed as something of an actual threat to the regime by neither the regime itself nor by most of the people living in Russia, because it's just like he's kind of like the image that I think is exists of him in Russia is basically like this social justice warrior kind of person who's like crusading against the politicians, which I mean, again, his anti-corruption research is rooted in truth, but like basically with the lack of viable alternatives to what exists, it doesn't really go that far.
Yeah, they could just use those journalistic means to build something, but they actually don't. They just use it as plain opposition. You know, I'm just curious about the communist perspective in Russia about going back to the country, or just giving life to the rural people, to the migrant ones, just maybe detaching themselves, not really fully detaching, but deprioritizing the urban and breathing a bit more life to the rural. And that's not necessarily just at the level of people, albeit they're most important in this, but also in terms of industry, in terms of revitalizing all the industries which have been neglected ever since the 90s, because along with the wave of privatizations in the 90s, with all those oligarchs buying and then leaving them to rust, everybody has been ignoring them. Combined with the demographic crisis, they just stay empty, and the people are old and cannot work them. I remember that in the 90s in Romania, people who have worked in collective farms with tractors and automated stuff, they just resorted back to tilling the fields manually. Just subsistence agriculture work. Because there wasn't the collectivity anymore. And I see necessary for any communist or even left project to just address it plainly.
Oh, I agree completely with you. I think that basically, if someone were to come out to the Russian political scene, or I'm pretty sure like Belarusian, Romanian, all of them, and pronounce that they're gonna just revitalize the factories, they're gonna bring work back to them, they're gonna actually like improve infrastructure, because that's something also that doesn't really get discussed a lot. But in Russia, for one, there's like around 20% of people live without plumbing, which includes, for instance, the house where I was born in, because I was born in the south of Russia in Krasnodar Krai, and basically my building did not have any kind of running water. We had to like use an outhouse and heat the water from the well in a gas heater. So, and that's how, and like my parents, like mostly because they went to study in Moscow, so that's where I grew up mostly. But still, I would go visit there, and like the school that my grandparents worked in still doesn't have any plumbing. Like it's just like something that if addressing something as crucial as that to the majority of the Russian people would just be like, that's how you get popular, that's how you get ahead. And that's actually something that I mean, obviously, like it's different landscapes, but that's how Trump got to power, because he was actually like going to like those Rust Belt places, like where the jobs had been taken away, and he was promising that. Did he fulfill this? It's questionable, and of course, like none of his politics are for the good of the people, but still, like that's you understand why he had this appeal, as opposed to like slave queen, first female president, neoliberal agenda of Hillary. And that's like, that's something that I was sad to see Bernie never do, because I feel like he could do this effectively as well. But just in general, everywhere, if like you kind of like stop trying to appease the bigger cities, because also they don't make up the majority of the electorate.
Exactly.
Like then you have something going on. But it's just incredible how no one does. Like very few people do, like at like lower levels, but like no one does. I mean, CPRF does that to a point, but I don't think they're just kind of like a lot of them are just like comfortable within their space as a opposition in the parliament, so they don't really need to try that much, and they don't really need to get too much concerned with the material conditions. It's like I was talking to like some of the members that were literally speculating about like trying to evolve their ideology by merging it with Orthodox Christianity, like communism and Christianity. That's what we need for the future, with like, which is bizarre, and I don't even know how to comment that, but that's something that like a real person in the party told me, and like actually 3 of them. I don't know what's the reason for that.
Just wondering what they related to, some group like Essence of Time.
That's actually, I don't know about those particular people, because it was when I was living there, and I have since forgotten their names. So because it was like a chance encounter, which was very bizarre. But yeah, maybe. But it's also interesting how like there are all those. We're talking about this recently about this historian who was persecuted in St. Petersburg for writing basically in defense of the White Army and like Nazi collaborationists and like Vlasov in general, I think. And he was persecuted there, but he was persecuted, and his writings were considered to be extremist materials by the court. But the people who he was I don't remember, he belonged to one of the organizations that are like the white Christian Russian or whatever. But the people who actually made the complaint to the court about him were either like another nationalist organization, only like that's nationalist, like anti-communist and anti-liberal, but like in a slightly different way. So they're like more aligned with like Russian identity against like Vlasov or whatever. It's like very bizarre to kind of like try to contain and because most of it doesn't make sense, but it's just very widespread right now. And you have and basically it was widespread like that since the collapse of the USSR, because I remember that you guys had a lot of like a lengthy conversation on like the nuts balls and everything, and that's pretty much like this like conflation between nationalism and other ideologies is just bizarre. I feel like it's a reaction to the USSR, but it's really weird.
Yeah, but they actually got some forced into them, like tens of thousands of people, like right after the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Like
and even like some people who are completely made sense otherwise, like were sucked into this. I can't really say why, because I was not a grown-up during that time, so I can't say like how like everything that was happening would shape my own views. But like you would see people who were just like completely to the left, then suddenly become like start embracing like Nazi stuff, and just basically I think that perhaps some of them opportunely thought that this would be a way to kind of like consolidate power, because pure communism was not in favor. But still, like, I don't think that's something that should be taken lightly.
But it's also the aesthetic dimension that the Nazis had. So they made all the memorabilia, Nazi memorabilia, combined with the communist ones. They made it cool again, as opposed to the ossified bureaucracy of the USSR. So I'm certain that may have taken a toll on like the bohemian strata of the people who still consider themselves communists, but were dissatisfied with the USSR at that point. They saw maybe a reinvigoration in the Nazis. And maybe maybe the left needs something like that in terms of coolness. And I'm not talking about the Nazi stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, it seems like there was this basically in like the 90s there was like this so you have like this sexy new image of the world that can be like, you have those supermodels with like those shoulder pads and like so many beautiful things that you can buy, and everything was like very materialistic, but like with the Soviet Union, like what we would associate, even like unnecessarily, like if it was true or not true, but just like the cues, like, and you really like the whole cues thing is like overblown, but there were like certain quotas for certain products, and of course there were people in power who were taking advantage of that and could always like get like some cool kind of sausage or something, and like in order to get get treated well at the doctors, you would bring them like a tin of canned fish or something like that. But basically, like, and so compare that to like the sexy excesses, and there's so many Nazi exploitation, like I don't know, like erotica films and stuff like that also like came into play. So this, of course, is more appealing than kind of I don't know, whatever, like then I don't know, Brezhnev and like just like the housing built for the people. Like that's, I think that's sexy, but I think in general, like it's not considered to be as sexy. So and that's also sad.
I also see that housing, Soviet blocks and so on are more, are better received by some of the American youth than by actually post-Soviet people here, because here they're already grounded and they know their use. For the Americans, in lack of better housing, they see in them some utopian thought and a utopian urge, a strength to actually build something for the people. People here are already accustomed to that, and they just consider them as given. And also, back to the Q stuff. So the Qs here, I'm actually impressed by the fact that nobody in left analysis here actually tries to get into depth into the causes of the crisis that was the 80s. But I've seen some analysis recently which actually put it in more materialist terms. It mentioned the oil crises of the 70s as major causes of the 80s period. I know that in Russia it was a bit different, but in Romania at least, those oil crises by themselves just encouraged the building of so many factories and the taking of so many loans from the IMF that the people themselves didn't have anything to actually live on. And that's where shortages come from. I don't really see that being addressed, like why that happened in the first place, why this reaction was, if it was justified or not.
I agree with you completely. I think that there's just so much that it's basically not just like with the Eastern Europe, but also with Africa. Like we don't really talk collectively about the way that the IMF, the World Bank, they were shaping their policies and with the resources and with the exploitation of them, the spaces in the so-called third world or in the Soviet bloc countries. It's just all of it was very much to the profit of those Western organizations and to the much detriment of the people within. And we're still only beginning to try to figure all of this out, because it just basically happened. And then there were the ads that were persuading people to donate and feed the starving children of Sudan or whatever, when in fact the material conditions deteriorated so much precisely because of the financial institutions interfering, and also strengthened by the political underminings that included assassinations and everything else. And the propaganda for all of that is just so powerful to this day that you really, it takes a while of reading, digging on your own to kind of just even get to the to approximate how that any of that even perspired, because if coming from outside of a very radical revisiting of those issues, you just think that that's just that's the global south just sucks. The post-Soviet bloc was drained by communism, so what else can we do? But the fact that there were other external forces that just effectively tried to drive this into the ground, and pretty much did, that's nobody knows about that. And I often think about this, how when I look at the media sphere right now, for instance, everything that we're hearing about China, it's kind of the same thing, because I'm thinking about how like 20 years in the future we're going to be basically trying, or 2050, whatever, we're going to be trying to talk about those things in the same terms as we're talking right now about everything from the Holodomor to like the things that happened, say in the Caribbean, with the influence of the CIA and everything. And I hope that we will not need to, because like the Chinese project, despite some deficiencies, will persevere and accomplish something great. But if not, then like it's just like be the same thing. Like basically like the sexier, more persistent propaganda will just win, and unfortunately make history completely, like you cannot move forward and not repeat the previous mistakes when you don't even know what the mistakes were, and when you don't even know that the mistakes made were not made by you. So that's such a dead end.
But I think China did succeed in addressing some of the contradictions that were present in the Eastern blocs. I mean, it's a long-term project, of course, and it's still in development. But we pretty much talked about it in the past episodes as well. But we're in short rooting for it to win. Sure, the American empire is still a thing, and it's still the number one in terms of cultural influence and so on. But I think it's coming to an end anyway. But it will be a hard and long battle.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and it's like it just kind of takes a boiling point that will be reached, and I feel like we have come to it a little bit in the past year, but what alarms me is that I don't really see I see a lot of disaffection. I see a lot of people within the US becoming tired of what's happening, and I don't think that either of the candidates are helping like assuage those feelings in any way, especially like Trump is at least an incumbent, but like Biden with his cop running mate, himself being a white racist in the times of the Black Lives Matter protests and against police violence is just so tone deaf. But I don't really see as many organizational structures undermining this, because there tends to be like a lot of anarchist action, but obviously we can't really garner anything structural from that to topple the empire consecutively. And
if anything, this whole collective of us is just opposed to the existing left institutions in the US and everywhere else that's Western aligned.
Sorry, just a quick, if that's okay.
Go.
Yeah, the thing about, so I kind of get the impression that the Americanization process, at least for the cultural elites in Russia and Eastern Europe, isn't necessarily complete. But I get a strange kind of dialectic is arising out of this, which is that in attempting, and this is just my experience, looking at Russian culture, the cool stuff, the trendy stuff in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, wherever you want, Asia. I mean, East Asia is a really good example of this. It seems like in attempting to be cool Americans, these people are actually becoming far more stylish, far more avant-garde, far more cool than anything we have here in America. It's kind of similar with like the British Empire at the point of its decline. People are trying to, in attempting to emulate what they consider, proper, whatever, British culture, they're actually participating in the process of outmoding England. But I just wonder, what do you think the response? Because China has already, I think, experienced this kind of fascination with American culture, and then they realized, oh, actually, we're cooler than Americans. So, to what extent, what do you think the response to this kind of Chinese cultural avant-garde is going to be, or is at this point in Russia?
So in Russia to the Chinese cultural avant-garde, it's very interesting. Yeah, and I think I completely agree with what you're saying. Yes, it's. I think it's actually because it's not that hard to overdo, not overdo, but to make something that's much cooler than the imperial or original, just because when you come from the outskirts of the empire, or the alleged empire or whatever, you're just way cooler than those who are comfortable in the bosom of it, just by the means that pretty much anyone who isn't in the West speaks more languages than anyone who is an American citizen. That's just a given, all of you guys. And basically you just but that's the thing that really concerns me about Russia and China, is that right now, given that the most of the people I know, just by the constraints of where I grew up and was born, are in the European part of Russia and mostly Moscow, because even though the place where I was born, it's closer to Iran than Moscow, it's still more homogenous with the European part. So I think it might be different, for instance, in Vladivostok and the Far East. But basically, what people get from China about China is not from China, but from the U.S. So, for instance, the Uyghur, I keep forgetting how to say that in English. In Russian, it's Uyghur. But the Uyghur camps. For instance, the narrative is completely Western, the Western packaging of it, as it is regurgitated, because that I feel this fascination with the American culture within the centers is still very strong. People are completely obsessed with old TV shows and music, and it's just kind of this. SNL and everything. That's and that's where they get their liberal views of the U.S. without any kind of criticism for the imperialism, and that's how they process reality in general. But on a more, and that's kind of very pervasive. And the other side of it, the Chinese avant-garde, for instance, I don't think that it has made its way into the general Russia, at least maybe regionally where it's closer, yes, but I have not seen it happen. Neither have I seen any kind of, I mean, BTS, for instance, has, but it's the same here in the US, and it's I don't know how avant-garde that is, but basically you have the local culture in Russia that's even when it doesn't, even when it's, for instance, pro-Putin and against, the American empire, even for instance, comedy shows that would make fun of, say, Obama or Trump, both, and kind of just not aligned with that, they're still functioning by the cultural markers of the Western cultural sphere. So there's a pervasive need to alienate the Soviet cultural markers, even though they're ubiquitous and they're awesome, and still everyone watches the same old Russian, Soviet Russian, and Ukrainian and everywhere else movies. It's the tradition for New Year, you watch the same ones. Everyone is obsessed with them. They're a part of the vernacular. The ones that have come later, they're all Westernized, and they are not trying to go back. Although I do see that there are some ways in which people are starting to use the Soviet cultural and very extensive landscape and kind of implemented in their work way more than anything that they want from the outside. But however, you still have this like very weird body of like the avant-garde creators, for instance, with this film Dao. I don't know how familiar you are with it. That's like based around the life of the academic Landau, but it's like a very post-modernist weird thing, which where like real babies were sexually harassed during the filming, and there's like a lot of pushback, and it was shown at like the European film festivals and considered to be something great, but in general it was just like abusive to real orphans at orphanages in Ukraine, and it's just that but it's like we're still not out of the woods yet, but there's already some things where you just like even for instance sketch comedies that are just kind of like trying to be with the people, and so that are trying to portray working class life and not just like try to imitate like something that's completely foreign to the Russian landscape. So I feel like we're probably getting there, but I don't know how to solve this big crevice between China and Russia, because even though like they don't seem to be antagonistic to each other, the two governments, it seems like we don't really get too much of a cultural exchange, and that's kind of sad, because I feel like it could be very productive and actually very good for the cultural shift and going on the path towards communism as well. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, we're trying to go back to the pre-Sino-Soviet split. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, that which would be amazing. But I feel like it's still a long way to go. But
yeah, of course. But speaking of the culture in Russia specifically, you could see Romania as a bit more westernized in the sense of not knowing the Russian language or other similar ones. Mm-hmm. And I was amazed when I actually discovered this little crevice of YouTube where I'm actually getting Russian music, and it's new Russian music. I'm thinking specifically of an artist called Antoha MC.
Yes, my favorite.
Yeah, I've seen it on your Twitter as well, and it instantly clicked. So he just has a video where he has what do you call that? A portable radio, where he goes and sings into the mic on Moscow streets with some 20 level blocks behind him. Mm-hmm. I'm picking up the verses, and he's talking about real simple worker life. And then I'm clicking more and more, and I'm just discovering those Russian bands which are just completely alien to the American way of life. They speak for a reality that's outside the Western case. Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely. I absolutely adore Antoha, because I think he's an absolute genius, and I really love hip hop in general. But in Russia, a lot of the hip hop, especially recent, is like very either imitating American hip hop or just like very liberal and kind of like about like glossy life and I don't know, eating burgers, because everyone in Russia is obsessed with burgers for some reason, which is weird because like in the Russian cuisine you have like meat patties which are kotlet, and you eat them with bread, and you've done this forever, but like everyone just like prefers it if it's fancy Western stuff. But yeah, it's actually, like what amazes me with Antoha is that I saw a video of him listing his favorite films, and like where other ones, like for instance, there's this very famous Russian rapper whose name is Oxymoron, and he's like Oxford-educated dude from like with very liberal leanings, and he's like out in protests, and he supports Navalny, and maybe he doesn't. I don't know. Like I think he does at one point, but
we can suppose that he does.
Yeah, probably, but doesn't really matter. But he basically they would just say like, oh yes, my favorite films are like I don't know, like Kubrick or whatever, in the best case scenario, or even like I don't know, what are the films that people watch? I don't really know, like what's the general, but like SNL and like this TV show that I saw, or like Rick and Morty or something like that. That's what I expect they would say. But even though like I like Rick and Morty myself, but the answers that Antoha gave were like Soviet films that like all of us in the Soviet Union grew up with, and they're like really cool comedies that are funny and like gems of like witty phrases that we all use in the language. They're like basically the heart of Russian culture, mostly like films by Guy Dai, but I don't really remember exactly which ones he mentioned, but I was like flabbergasted because that's just so unexpected for someone, and I think he's like in his late 20s, to like be completely rid of all of these things, but at the same time be like a prominent player on the cultural industry. And I see that like he's not alone, and there are other people like that who are actually treating the Soviet culture as not something that you have to either parody or you have to just reject completely, but something that is from which you can continue. And I find it so important. And I'm seeing this a bit in literature. I'm seeing this a bit in music. I don't know if I'm seeing it like even in art, where social realism, which is universally despised by like the PNC art community, because
of course,
as we know, like social realism was what the abstract art was used against in the cultural wars of the CIA and everything. But that's where it's at. That's how also like how you advance the understanding, because like at least we need to normalize, because I was also recently there's this guy, I think it's a guy, but there's this person on Twitter by the name of Georgi, who's often sharing some like glossy images of what life in the USSR used to be, and they're immensely popular because they're really beautiful and everything. And I saw a lot of people like in Moscow, who are like Moscow liberals or whatever, get annoyed because this is supposedly a glamorization of their suffering or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but basically they the whole idea of seeing something like that seems so foreign to them, even though they will watch Mad Men and be all over it when it's like the glamorization. And actually people in Russia are currently making TV shows to imitate Mad Men and everything, to kind of like and films to kind of like glamorize the Soviet Union. So it's kind of like, that's like, but like you should do that, but you should not glamorize just like to make it Western looking. You should just like get to its essence, because it was not what the Western culture is. It was different. Like the portrayals of sex were completely different. Like you probably could have been a little bit more forward with the fact that people do actually have sex sometimes, but at the same time, like there was no unnecessary sexualization, and like none of the things that like really annoy me in Western cinema, for instance, when you watch it. And then like the two characters necessarily need to fall in love and have this romance, like I don't know, go work or do something. I want you to see how you take care of the house instead, as much as I love and everything. But so it's changing a bit, and I hope that it will, even though I see a lot of reluctance from the culture, because right now the gatekeepers of the cultural institutions are all very liberal people, and basically that's the same in media as well, because the media that you have, except for like the state media, it's mostly just outlets that are funded by either foreign governments, like Medusa, for instance, is funded by the Swedish government, and like you have those outlets that are run by Khodorkovsky, etc. And the same with the gatekeepers in culture, because I've been recently talking to some film producers, like trying to get some screenwriting work, and they are all very excited about making a lot of films about like how some Americans came to Russia to build communism and then perished in the gulags, or like how Stalin was a thug during his early years, and they're so obsessed with this, and you see that there's like so much money being pumped into that to just kind of like perpetuate this myth of Soviet Union as something nefarious. It's upsetting, but I hope that also, like, as we go along and the gatekeepers might start changing, although like it's sad because like it always seems that like the ideology lies behind capital, and unfortunately like you don't really have that many people holding capital for communists, because that's kind of, yeah, it doesn't work like that. But so yeah, I don't know if I'm hopeful, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, in terms of TV series I liked, it was actually Russian. It was Better Than Us in English. Have you seen it? It's on Netflix as well. Yeah.
I don't know. Wait, on Netflix, I think there was something. I haven't seen it. I remember of that there was. It was like the first Russian one on Netflix, but yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
I think
What's it about?
Was in collaboration with a Chinese company.
Oh, really? That's so cool.
Or it was distributed in China. I don't remember, but it had the vibe too. That show, I really liked it.
Yes, it was available in Russia and China initially.
Wow, that's amazing. I haven't seen that. That's so cool. So what's it about?
It's about a nuanced take on AI. So like
okay, yeah.
So the bots.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, and I was going to see it. Yeah. It seems really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, because it actually gets into the depth of like Russian personal life, like the family with and the oligarchs. To put it shortly, the oligarchs have access to AI sex bots, and it all goes down from there because one of them gets consciousness.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that's something people in the US should watch a lot.
Yes.
Because, yeah.
It's actually really interesting in how they portrayed it, how they... Yeah, each of the characters has a particular moment where they just... they see themselves, they find themselves, and it all wraps up in the end with... Oh, let me go again. It all makes sense from the perspective of tackling AI as outside the American perspective of AI. So like just dealing with the problems of consciousness that stem from the AI debate.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I feel like I would really want to actually, I mean, you get that a bit, but like also just the perspectives on science from the point of view of Russia too, but most importantly, like communist countries. I feel like it's so important, so vastly important, because it's just so tiring of how like the ethics and of it and are all described by from the standpoint where it's not even possible to really advocate for science when you're trying to like limit it to profitability, which is the only way that science exists within like the capitalist system. So like looking at it from like the standpoint of China or like Cuba, which of course has limited resources, but like still like look at their medical. I mean, even like Bill Gates recently was asking in an interview, like, how could that be that Vietnam and like Cuba and all those communist countries are doing so well with coronavirus? Like because it's a different approach, and yeah, that's amazing. I will see the show immediately. Thank you so much for telling me.
Yeah. And speaking of that, it's such a one-sided perspective when Americans speak of those countries, especially when let me say they're talking about Russia and the reactions to the Russian coronavirus vaccine. So it's just stemmed into this American uniqueness they perceived it. How could that be? How could they just create the vaccine?
Absolutely, yeah. It's as if it's actually very pervasive within Russia as well. That you constantly say that science is non-existent here and medicine is non-existent here, which was also very obvious when Navalny was in the Russian hospital before he was taken out of the country, and everyone was talking about how can he be amongst Russian doctors? They don't know shit. They can't cure him, which is well, okay, just I don't know, just migrate, and if it's so bad, it's the problems are not because the Russian doctors are idiots or something. It's there are many structural things that are preventing Russian medicine to be where it's at, but I'm pretty sure that Russian doctors are actually good at their jobs, and just historically you can see that. If we had the similar political situation as Cuba, Vietnam, or China, they would be thriving more. So yeah, it's the vaccine it's interesting. I'm secretly rooting for it, but I don't know if it's gonna it might work well. Of course, I do know that there are concerns about the fact that it wasn't tested extensively, and so they only tested it on rather young and white people when in the majority of them. Which is it's true for the Russian context because of the majority of people in Russia are white, although not young. But it's obviously doesn't really apply to, for instance, the country that's suffering from the coronavirus most, is Brazil. But still, it's interesting where that's going to go. I think, I don't know, you probably have seen that role. I have mentioned on Twitter that I know a woman that has had the injection because she works at an office owned by an oligarch who is elderly, and so he wants to have all of his employees get the vaccine so that he doesn't get it. So she's doing fine at this point, but we'll see. But it's also interesting how that's more of a concern than the fact that anything else, that you have this vaccine and people are buying it for their own oligarchic offices when no one else has any way to get it. That's the issue, which was the same when the coronavirus just started in Russia. You had people buying their own ventilators, and so there was a shortage of ventilators for hospitals because everyone had their own, among the very rich people. And I don't know, right now there's probably everyone has them, but will they ever use them? It's just a little bizarre. But yeah, it's it's basically the Western view of all of this is trying to it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the West because it basically misinforms people in what they should see abroad as where the problems are not stemming from the exact same things where they're stemming from here in with corruption and austerity and stuff like that. And at the same time, they're not helping the people back there because they're otherwise are left out of the conversation completely, or they kind of buy into the same kind of propaganda coming from abroad. And that's just completely unacceptable and should be changed, which is why I feel it's important for everyone who comes from a non-Western country to just try to talk about the things that they see materially, the evidence that exists for what's good, what's bad, what's good from because of the communist era, what's needs to be changed. There's no other way.
And specifically about the communist era, it's much needed. An analysis of the communist past is much needed, especially from the people who have actually lived there or have first or second-hand experience with it. In terms of, look, just I'm going to talk to my grandparents about their personal experience in the kolkhozes, or our equivalent here in Romania. Because, and I'm specifying grandparents especially because their generation, I think in most Eastern European countries, has seen both the good and bad of communism. Because my parents maybe have only seen the bad. They've only seen the 80s and the 70s and the end of 70s when it was all going down. But the older generation, the same ones who are now left to rot in the countryside, actually have more wisdom in regards to that. And I'm so disappointed by the fact that I don't see the left going up to them and instead treating them as rats or as people who steal their votes or who vote with the corrupt establishment. There's so much more than that. There's so much more wisdom that can be found by going to the countryside, as a phrase.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with what you're saying about how like they see that like the older people are stealing the votes. That's a very prevalent narrative in Russia, even though again, like before working as an observer at an election of the mayor, I worked as an observer at a presidential election where you had Putin won, obviously, but you also had like Zyuganov came second, and then you had like a liberal candidate, the oligarch Mikhail Prokhorov, who is basically also in addition to being an oligarch and everything, is also implicated in some very sketchy Jeffrey Epstein things. But basically, but he was nonetheless like the choice for many. And well, not that many, thankfully, but still, so and like even in Moscow, like I observed this voting station where I know that everything was completely up to like the regulations and everything was going well, like, and people were not even elderly, but they still like predominantly were voting for either Putin or Zyuganov. And even though like the vote for this Prokhorov guy was more than it was in overall across the country, but like still there's this it's just so easy to blame it on the older generation when like with divorce, or like on the rural people, with completely divorcing their ideologies from their material condition. Because for instance, if you take my own grandmother, like my own sole surviving grandparent, like she was born a little bit before the war, and like she spent her childhood as a with her mother and her half sister, with like basically in the steppes of Azerbaijan and Armenia, just like looking for work, trying to survive because they had nothing. And in the aftermath of the war, she got a higher education. She became a teacher. She was active in the local government and in the party. And at this, her husband, however, was always like listening to Voice of America and everything, my grandfather. And he died when I was young, but like I understand that he and her had a lot of those spats between them. Like he would make fun of her for being in the party, but like she's like a little bit not well right now in terms of like she's pretty an advanced age, and so she like you can't really have a conversation without her like caveating or like going like a little loopy. But at the same time, like I just see like such an example of like a person who from nothing got quite a lot, and even though like she lived in quite harsh conditions, again, as I've mentioned, like the house where I was born was like didn't even have plumbing, but still like she had security in her life, and she was and so did my grandfather, and although he had like his own problems. So I feel like that's kind of, and right now, like saying that my grandmother, who wants to vote for Zyuganov or Putin, depending on, like, again, her ideology at this point is a little murky, so I can't say, but like just saying that she's like spoiling the vote is, I feel like, very offensive. And I even see that in the family, that a lot of the people think that she's like she's always been like not sound in her ideology. But I actually, like, I relate a lot to that, and I kind of wish more people like actually did like, if they don't have anyone in their own families, that they went to seek them out. Because also a lot of the people who are structuring this political dialogue in Russia, like most of the liberals, they come from like big city families where their parents were quite well off during the Soviet Union, like not necessarily well off, but like at least comfortable. And so like it's also were doing kind of fine during the 90s, or got rich during the 90s, for instance. And basically they have nowhere to look for other points of view. So for them, like in this closed world, it's basically like Soviet Union was, even if they can agree that it wasn't like the evil empire that is described to be, like it was, it didn't have liberties, and now we have a little bit more of those liberties, but we want even more. That's as far as it goes. But like it's like, and also like it's you have to understand that it might be, I don't know how it works, for instance, in Romania, because it's a much smaller country, but in Russian, people don't really tend to travel that much. So you usually like, and even like I am myself like very poorly traveled in Russia. Like right now, if I were there, I would travel everywhere. But basically, like before I came to realize that this was a necessity ideologically and materially, I had not been anywhere past the Urals, and so I don't really like know, outside of like what I see in documentaries or hear from people who live there or things like that, like what are the material conditions. And it's so drastically different from what we see in Moscow, because even comparing my hometown, which at least I have that, so I can see like a different picture, like that at least gives me some perspective. But it's really hard to get it without looking for it, and especially if you're reluctant to.
Right. Here in Romania, for example, since it's a smaller country, you actually get to cross through those villages which are more poor or have really lacking infrastructure. But and I think a majority of the people are aware of the fact, but there's just no voice for them to be heard. Let me put it the other way. They're just not organized in a way in which they could be heard, like from the country, not just city people making fun of the countryside, which happens a lot. Like in our national TV shows, we have one which is just parodying the countryside, like people being dumb in the countryside. And that's all it is. It has like 8 seasons now.
It's interesting because in a sense, it's during the communist era that these people were even given recognition as part of humanity, you know? And I think that a phenomena, just really quick, a general phenomena that I'm noticing in the outside of the West is that people kind of think in two ways. They think in their native tongue, in their native language, not just speak, but also think. And then they also think in English. Like, it's almost like they lie to themselves and construct these narratives that are only addressed toward this kind of American audience, or what they would say, like the big other, right? So it's almost a matter of just discovering not only what's in the country, but what's also deeply embedded in your own unconscious.
No, absolutely. I think that's kind of like what I was struggling with throughout my life, because both of my parents are pretty liberal, and they basically, as Will has said, they had seen like the worst parts, and so they're reluctant to acknowledge the good parts. And also, they were one of the few lucky ones that actually didn't go through like extreme poverty or during the post-Soviet era, but because basically they were students at like just before it, and basically they were able to shape their lives after it. So unlike many people who were already having like solid lives at like factories that were privatized and then completely were robbed of livelihood. But yeah, that's just like I have to constantly go back to rethink what I know about my own country, about my own family, through kind of like to strip the layers of what I had been told or even like had been like taken for granted and internalized from what it actually seems like the truth was. And it's extremely hard, and especially like even as being pretty liberal, my parents like, because I don't think they're ideological liberals, it's just in general their generation is like a very like messed up generation. Like it's really like weird things going on, but basically they try to like the narrative they're saying sometimes contradicts what they're also talking about. So it's like it's you can't really get a concrete understanding of it until you start actively challenging it, and that's hard. That's something that not everyone has the resources to do, and that's pretty much like a political position. Like it's like it takes a while, especially when you also have this like English voice in your head that tells you, like in the voice in which you can't even imagine something contrary to the traditional ideology being said. That's like that takes so much effort, and I'm so angry about that, because we could have been like I don't know, doing much better things if we didn't have to like shovel for all of this mud that we have been granted by the neoliberalism, by the anti-communist propaganda. We just so much work for nothing. Well, I mean for something, but just like wasted. So many efforts wasted. It's incredible. A Sisyphean effort.
Yeah, it's a lost future. I'm having the same thoughts myself. Like I've been specifically researching some urban stuff, like the projects the communists did in the city I live in now, which is the second biggest in Romania. So, and it's just amazing.
What's the name?
Cluj-Napoca.
Okay, yeah, I know that one.
Okay, so it's just impressive how much they built, how bad it was before they came, and the difference you can see even now, 30 years after they've been dead and buried. Because and they had so many plans for the future. Like they had something like Cluj 2000. Well, if only that came to be. But in 92, like 83% of the buildings were built in the period in which they've been to power. So it was a necessary step to do, because you had all these people coming into the industrialized zone from the countryside. But they did it, and they did it pretty fast compared to the Industrial Revolution in the West.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just like just yesterday I was reading about a man who's writing his like a book about Brezhnev's time, and he was mentioning about how many people were housed during that time, like how many buildings were built and like how many apartments were given, and that's just staggering. I don't remember the exact number, unfortunately, but like it was very big, and that's just something that, and basically it was also like recently there was at the MoMA here, like the great big anti-communist MoMA, there was an exhibition dedicated to the Yugoslavian architecture, and it's obviously absolutely wonderful, and but they kind of like tried to present it as like something like a relic of a bitter time, but at the same time they couldn't like, you can't really like just show amazing buildings and kind of like projects for development for like that will provide people with residences and everything, and kind of like just shit on it with intent, because like, well, it just becomes like a dichotomy that you can't really like
have they seen what Yugoslavia became after they stopped building the buildings?
Exactly. Yeah, I think, and it actually like was cut off, but like you could see, for instance, when there were photographs of some kind of monument that were taken after the collapse of Yugoslavia, like you could see that like, yeah, stuff wasn't really going well around it. Yeah, and that's just and basically like it's also extremely weird, like how New York is obviously like one of the biggest, is not the biggest real estate markets in the world, and when you look at like what they're building and what they're trying to convey in the buildings that they do, it's exactly what like the Soviet idea was. For instance, like those fancy condominiums that they built here, they are supposed to have like a community kitchen that like people can come and like get cooking lessons or something. It's obviously like it's all done for like a very capitalist lens, but at the same time, like it's common areas and like having like access to daycares or stuff like that, like all of those things that are basically what like the great revitalization and urbanization and like just building projects of the communist era were like. It's like, and then they go and denounce this as something like completely unacceptable.
Well, it looks like socialism already won in the US.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, another thing that I saw, like just before coronavirus started, there was a big exhibition at Guggenheim that was basically like talking about farming and everything. It was kind of xenophobic, but like, and of course, like the approach is not something that I would admire. But basically, they were like talking about the ways to advance agriculture and like ecology and everything, and like the examples that they were using were all like from like either the Soviet bloc countries or like from like the French communal experiments, and again they're like using them and then trying to like say something bad about them and passing. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, I just can't imagine Guggenheim Museum presenting kolkhozes.
No, there were kolkhozes in that exhibition as well, but they were like you can see how much they're trying to like make it like just like, yeah, that's like good, but like, yeah, also gulag or something. Like, yeah.
One of our ideas theoretically actually is that you can actually look at the collapse of communism through the lens of this idea that in a way socialism already was somehow consolidated or became somehow superfluous. So we're seeing a lot of things emerge in general that are very reminiscent of the Soviet bloc, from Silicon Valley, and even Tesla as a company is like with its all back orders, it has all these problems of Amazon, the bureaucracy, all these issues of central planning. So it's interesting to think about, you know, to what extent is the vision of socialism today in America superfluous by history? Like, what is this capitalism we have now something completely different? I think you can even look at Russia and Eastern Europe in the same way. Is it exactly capitalism, or is it some strange thing?
No, that's amazing what you're just saying. I think that, yeah, that's a very big part of it, because, and that kind of like gives me hope as well, because basically that's what makes it so remarkably evident how when people are actually getting mistreated by by the systems as opposed to like how they're supposed to be treated. And that's why like there was so much outrage about the NHS discussions in the UK, for instance, or like that's basically why even though like the entirety of the US is still behind on that, like in New York, you actually have although not for all income levels and everything, but you actually have affordable ways of getting healthcare. So yeah, I think that it's just basically like it's maybe this is something that will just kind of like right now we're experiencing a stop for some moment, and then we can just like go back to building upon what already exists, and we will just like not forfeit it as much as they want us to, because already you can just like really get rid of the good ideas, and as much as everyone is trying to like they're getting rich and dying, and as less people get rich, then perhaps like this little amount of people profiting off of the reverse systems are just like gonna go away, and we'll have something decent to build. No, yeah, that's a very interesting thought. I haven't thought about, but yeah, thank you. I'm gonna be thinking about this a lot. So, like,
it also makes one a bit more optimistic about the future prospects.
Exactly.
But still,
yeah, that's also,
that shouldn't take away from criticism from the same, in the context we're living, or anything. Because many may take that for granted to just not do anything and just thrive in it.
Absolutely. And I think that's also like very evident in how things around the coronavirus were evolving everywhere, because even though, for instance, like when we talk about the things that happened in the US during that, like for instance, most of the, I think all of the states are not really, because I am self-employed, so it's, and also like not a citizen, and so it doesn't apply to me, so I only know this as far as I can tell from like what my friends tell me. But basically that unemployment benefits, for instance, in New York, there were structured in a way that people were getting them through them more money than they would actually be making in some cases, although of course it was completely discriminatory against migrant workers, people who are like not employed very in very reliable jobs and stuff like that. But just for the, like the general American public, like it did not, there was no catastrophe. I mean, it's still like everything is crumbling down and everything, but at the same time, like it's whatever we would be expecting from happening everywhere. It was like more evident in like countries like Russia, for instance, than in the West. So it's basically like as like reality is endorsing socialism and kind of like making it impossible. Of course, like we just need to get rid of the obstacles that will help to not just like have it reserved for like times when things are tough, but also for like a more coherent future.
New Yorkers are becoming more like pensioners here.
Yeah,
it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. It's yeah, it's and actually like it's just like I feel like also it's like the welfare systems, for instance, like everyone is just like the narratives about them are not necessarily like it doesn't seem like they're any legitimate like America seems to be like I'm trying to phrase what I'm trying to say here, but the US seems to be the only place where there's like where they're trying to see like reverse the good things that have happened through political action because of the very like a narrow two-party system, because it just like there doesn't seem to be enough space to like discuss that enough, and the two parties that you have here are just like too similar to each other. So basically this limits like the conversations on welfare so much, but I feel like everywhere else it's like it's a more vibrant landscape in terms of like how you actually discuss that those things. And even so, like you still have like some structures in place that already cannot be removed. So I don't know if that's if I expressed what I wanted.
Is the jobs from the Fordist era of the 20th century, mid 20th century, which went overseas, that's kind of our socialism in America. That's like that's being dismantled, and that's Trump's base, you know, is this kind of our pensioners here, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's and that's that's something that's where we're gonna see some interesting things develop, and because it's also like this is like it's causing so much reaction now, like this whole thing. But I wonder if in the long run, how viable will it remain to use the anti-Chinese sentiment as a way of like garnering the votes and support of the contingent who are like affected by this directly, especially as they age and grow older, and like there are less and less people who are like in jobs that can be transferred abroad. I wonder how much more that's going to remain a working point, or like whether people will be able to kind of like just see how things actually can be different elsewhere, and kind of like try to want it for themselves as well.
Yeah, I think I've extinguished all the subjects I've had to ask. So
awesome.
Yeah, we've had a really good run. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me and enlightening me on so many things. It's incredibly valuable to learn about perspectives that you yourself might not have had. And I'm very grateful to you guys for that, and hope to hear you talk to your other guests more and learn from you as well.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you.